The incident that started everything was a 4:12 a.m. alert, an unlogged failure in the CI/CD pipeline I personally built 12 years ago. The auto-escalation script didn't catch it because I, in my infinite wisdom, had manually written a bypass to prevent false positives during our weekend batch runs. Except this one wasn't false. The staging deploy had crashed hard, dangling a half-deployed artifact like a rope swing over a canyon, and nobody would have seen it until someone's Monday morning dashboard lit up like a goddamn Christmas tree. So I fixed it. Sipped my burnt office coffee while staring into the server logs like a priest reading entrails. Quiet. Efficient. Done. The lights above my desk still flickered the same way they did when I moved into this office, back when Amazon's cloud console still looked like Craigslist. 15 years, 3 CTOs, 2 office moves, and 1 unforgettable meltdown later, and the only thing that hadn't been replaced was me. I was fine with that. I liked the silence. I liked systems more than people. Systems didn't lie. Systems didn't talk over you in meetings or ask if you were still up to speed with the new stack. Systems either worked or they didn't, and mine always worked. Until, apparently, I did too well. Before we go deeper, do me a small favor. If you're enjoying the story, hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps these stories coming and really means the world to the team putting them together. That morning, as I locked down the pipeline and recompiled the build without a single soul knowing, I heard laughter across the office Slack channel. A junior dev named Riley had posted a screenshot of a build fix, claiming credit for restoring deployment stability. Only problem? The timestamp on his post came 10 minutes after I'd already cleaned up the mess. And yet, there he was, being flooded with emoji claps and nice save comments from the rest of the team, including our new VP of Engineering, Trevor, who wrote, "Love to see initiative like this. Keep it up, Riley." I didn't say anything, just sipped the sludge in my cup and stared at my terminal. I wasn't surprised. Trevor had been on a roll lately, slashing meetings, firing up growth-focused roadmaps, and side-eyeing me like I was the fax machine we forgot to toss out in 2011. First thing he did when he came in was move me off the visibility board. No more daily ops briefings, no more weekly change reviews. The new blood, as he called them, would drive us forward. Trevor was the kind of guy who said, "Let's disrupt," with a straight face and wore Allbirds like they gave him divine purpose. In his second week, he gave a 30-minute presentation on modernizing culture, which mostly meant hiring a dozen fresh-out-of-bootcamp engineers with half the competence and twice the ego. They'd huddle near the glass meeting rooms, tossing jargon like Kubernetes fluency and CI native pipelines, while I quietly rotated out expired access tokens and patched holes they hadn't noticed. I caught them calling me Old Nina once. Not to my face, of course. I wasn't supposed to hear it. But you'd be surprised how careless people get when they think the old lady has her headphones in. Jokes about COBOL, memes about floppy disks. Riley had made a bingo card labeled Legacy Nina-isms. One square said, "Did you try rebooting it?" The funny thing is, I did try rebooting it. The whole damn company, more than once. Quietly, with root access they forgot I even had. I was the one who wrote the emergency bootloader recovery protocols after a junior deleted the staging subnet in 2017. I was the one who got our compliance cert renewed by rebuilding the infrastructure templates overnight when the auditors flagged a drift. I never wanted praise. I wanted silence. No Slack pings. No questions. Just clean logs and uptime. That morning, as the clock hit 6:12 a.m., I got another alert. This one was different. An unauthorized API call trying to overwrite our IAM access tree, not from an external threat, internal. A dev I didn't recognize was trying to replicate root level permissions, sloppy too. Didn't even fork the base template properly. I traced it. It came from an account with newly granted admin level credentials. Pushed through by Trevor. I stared at the console for a long moment, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my email, searched for an old contract, and clicked on a document titled Brooks Promotion ARD Amendment V3. The date was 5 years ago. The clause, 12B, my signature at the bottom, right under a line that read, "Final operational access shall be retained by Brooks in the event of emergency or restructure, until delegated authority is confirmed in writing by CTO and Ops Council." They'd never confirmed it. I smiled. Then I stood up, walked to the corner of my desk drawer, and opened a small wooden box. Inside was a cold, silver rectangle, a hardware security dongle engraved with my initials. The last piece of hardware root auth that hadn't been rotated, because you don't rotate root when you trust it, and you only trust what you understand. Nobody had asked for it back. Nobody knew I still had it. And after today, they were damn well going to wish they had. Trevor strutted into Monday's all hands like a guy who just bought a Tesla and assumed it made him a genius. Slides already cued, blazer way too tight for a man who lifted nothing heavier than a soy latte. Time to shake things up, he grinned, pacing like a TED Talk dropout. We need agility, innovation, fresh blood. Then he looked directly at me, held that smarmy little eye contact half a second too long, just long enough to let the chuckle that followed sting like cheap aftershave. I didn't blink, didn't fidget. Just noted the HR rep in the back scribbling something in her notebook and the new hires nodding like bobbleheads fresh out of orientation. I've seen this movie before. Every time a new VP comes in thinking they're the hero, someone quiet gets turned into a villain for doing their job too well. He clicked to a slide titled Restructure Opportunities. That was the moment the floor shifted beneath us all, but most of them were too busy sipping La Croix to notice. My name wasn't on the restructure grid, not even in the legacy systems box. It was like I'd never existed. They didn't fire me. That would have required confrontation, paperwork, responsibility. No, they did something worse. They buried me under 1,000 transition opportunities. Suddenly, things I used to own, CI/CD monitoring, artifact versioning, cloud billing audits, were being temporarily reassigned to junior devs under the guise of cross-training. I wasn't invited to the handoff meetings. I just noticed when I went to update a deployment and got a permissions error. I submitted a ticket. It was auto-closed. No explanation. 2 days later, Riley posted a selfie holding a DevOps handbook with the caption, "Look out world, I'm rootin' now." The replies were fire emojis and some genius asking if he could automate pizza delivery next. I didn't reply. I just logged into our infrastructure console and pulled the access log history, every security token, every failed script call, every half-baked change Riley had attempted that was quietly blocked by the safety catches I embedded years ago. They didn't even realize the systems weren't running because of their work. They were running because I'd made them idiot-proof. A week into Trevor's Fresh Blood initiative, HR quietly rolled out a title review. My official designation, Senior Site Reliability Engineer, was flagged as non-standardized. When I asked what that meant, the HR girl, maybe 23 and trembling like a rescue puppy, said, "We're just aligning role names to reflect current org needs." I said nothing, just nodded, smiled politely, then walked back to my desk. I checked the audit trail. My title had been stripped from every documentation page, every pipeline signature, every internal policy reference. My job still existed, but apparently I didn't, except I did. In one place, the access key registry. See, automation has fingerprints. Every cron job, every Lambda trigger, every fallback script, it's all tagged. I pulled the active key list. There were exactly 7 automation services still live. 6 of them had been migrated under generic service accounts. One of them still ran under n.brooks.root.auth. Mine. That was the heartbeat. The one they didn't touch. Probably because nobody left in that office actually knew what it did, and nobody wanted to be the idiot who shut it off. So I made a copy of the org chart, highlighted every spot where my name used to be. Then I emailed it to myself. Not to my company inbox, which they could lock down in a heartbeat, but to my personal encrypted archive. I labeled it org collapse begins.pdf. Later that afternoon, I heard Trevor joking in the hallway. "We're finally modernizing the place," he said to a group of developers clustered around someone's MacBook. Then, not even lowering his voice, he added, "That old school engineer? What's her name? Nadine? Noreen? The quiet one. She's not exactly cloud native." Someone snorted. "She still prints logs." They laughed. Even David, the CTO, chuckled as he passed by. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen. They think I'm gone already. That night, as the office emptied and the Slack channels went quiet, I walked over to the locked cabinet behind my desk, the one everyone assumed just held snacks and outdated dongles. I unlocked it, pulled out a tiny velvet pouch, and set it next to my keyboard. The original YubiKey, the one bound to the top-level emergency recovery protocol that only I could trigger. And the thing about recovery mode, you can't override it unless you know exactly where the lock is hidden. They didn't know, but they would. Soon. They called it System Access Rotation Week, like it was some cheerful tradition passed down from the gods of GitHub. In reality, it was Trevor's latest brainchild, a half-baked security refresh initiative dressed up in corporate lipstick. He pitched it at stand-up like a genius unveiling fire to a crowd of cavemen. We're updating all access points to reflect modern best practices. He beamed, probably quoting a Medium article he barely skimmed. No more legacy keys, everything's going clean. By legacy, of course, he meant me. The memo hit my inbox like a brick through glass. All hands were to reset their credentials and prepare complete documentation of their infrastructure stack. I blinked at the screen. No invite to the kickoff call, no mention of root level clearance, no acknowledgement of the buried subnets I'd hand-scripted when AWS still required you to manually bind IAM policies. Just a smiling emoji from HR and a bullet point list written by someone who'd clearly never deployed anything more complicated than a Hugo blog. I stared at the email for a long time, then opened the attached Excel sheet titled DevOps Rotation Plan. It had columns for system name, current owner, and proposed custodian. My name showed up twice, only under current. The proposed fields were filled with names like Riley, Kim, and some poor intern named Jake, who once asked if SSH was that black box thing. They thought they could lift my stack like it was IKEA furniture. Unscrew a few bolts, follow a diagram, move it somewhere else. What they didn't understand, what they never bothered to ask, was that most of it wasn't even written down. I was the documentation, because the systems I built had been duct-taped across a decade of pivoting strategies, leadership turnovers, and half-implemented platforms that everyone forgot about once the next shiny thing came along. And the scripts? Sure, I'd written plenty, but they were tools, not replacements. You give a hammer to a toddler, they don't build a house. They crack the drywall and wonder why it's dusty inside. So I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. They didn't know what they were doing, and they were doing it anyway. I received a Slack ping from someone on Trevor's modernization squad, God help us all, asking if I could jot down a brief walkthrough of the backup orchestration process. Said he had a template, wanted to streamline the knowledge transfer. I sent back a thumbs up. Then I opened a plain text doc titled README Final VERO.txt and wrote the following. 1. Pray. 2. Hope the last cron job succeeded. 3. If not, call me. 4. If I don't answer, panic. I deleted it 5 seconds later, but it felt good. The actual documentation request came through later that day, generic as hell. Please describe your infrastructure responsibilities, including key systems, access paths, and recovery protocols. Due by Friday EOD. They wanted me to draw them a map, so I did, just not the kind they expected. I opened a terminal and ran a trace of the current cloud instance inheritance, 6 layers deep. My name still appeared at root on the automation watchdog, 2 build orchestrators, the CI monitor, and, most importantly, the emergency vault containing every live environment rollback token. No junior dev had access to that layer. No automation script could elevate permission high enough without triggering a security alert, except none of those alerts existed anymore. I'd retired them, by hand. When the CTO approved budget cuts last quarter, I'd quietly replaced the third-party security manager with internal watchdogs. Not out of spite. Just practicality. But those watchdogs, they didn't report to anyone but me. Nobody asked who maintained them. Nobody cared. Until now. And now, the new access scripts weren't going to reach them. They were going to break, and no one would know why. I walked to the corner of my office. The part nobody visited unless they wanted snacks or small talk, and I provided neither. I opened a low drawer, pulled out a small cardboard box. Inside, one YubiKey, one thumb drive, and one laminated printout of clause 12B, folded neatly like a prayer card. The dongle clicked into the edge of my laptop with a small blink of green. Still active, still recognized, still mine. I left it there while I started to clean out the drawer. Not a lot to take, just the essentials. My backup mug, a framed photo of my old team before they'd all left or been replaced, and a small plastic dinosaur a coworker gave me years ago as a joke. The last DevOpsaurus, they'd called me. Now, maybe. But this DevOpsaurus still had fangs. Nobody noticed I was packing. Not the interns doing hallway TikToks. Not the engineers arguing over tabs versus spaces. Not even Trevor, who passed my door while bragging on speakerphone about the seamless shift to cloud-native principles. I kept packing. Slow, quiet, methodical. They could have asked, but they didn't, so I didn't warn them. I waited until Friday evening, after the Slack channels went quiet and the only sounds in the office were the hum of dying fluorescents and the click of some poor bastard in accounting trying to reconcile cloud billing tags that made no sense since the last reorg. I wasn't staying late out of duty. I was staying because this was my territory. At night, the building remembered who it belonged to. I'd known for weeks now that they were boxing me out. They just didn't know I'd already started writing my exit plan 6 months ago. Not because I was bitter. Not yet, anyway, but because the writing had been on the wall since Trevor walked in with his 10x dev energy and a podcast mic tucked into his carry-on. The real turning point had been subtle. HR switched my classification in the directory from infrastructure architect to legacy system advisor. One word, one little swap. But in tech, that might as well be a death sentence. That was when I'd started digging. I went into the company drive archive that night. Buried under layers of old HR folders and naming conventions that hadn't aged well. Seriously, corp struct, final v4, final v7, final really.pdf. I found it. Brooks, Amendment, Addendum 12B PDF. It was dated 5 years ago, signed by the now retired CTO, our former general counsel, and myself. The clause read like something out of a dusty security manual. In the event of breach, loss of operational oversight, or procedural ambiguity, Brooks shall retain primary root authority over all infrastructure instances under the assumption of emergency protocol continuity. Delegation or transfer of said authority requires express written approval by CTO and general counsel. No one had updated it. No one had voided it. And every system still pulsed under the same logic tree. My authority wasn't a badge swipe. It wasn't a Slack roll. It was a signed, buried clause. And in the world of DevOps, paper still beats PowerPoint. I printed the clause. On real paper. Thick, off-white resume stock I'd kept in my filing cabinet out of stubborn pride. Folded it once, cleanly, like a letter from the IRS. Then I took out the small black capsule from my bag, my encrypted storage device. Inside it, master recovery tokens, encrypted shell scripts, and a full rollback image of the deployment tree as of last Sunday, before they started their rotation. I placed both into the cardboard box under my desk next to my photo, my mug, and the little dinosaur. The weight of it wasn't much, but it might as well have been the spine of the company. Then came the part that took real care. I opened my laptop and logged into our security dashboard. Not the one everyone used with the pretty graphs and Slack alerts. The real one. The one I built under the radar during the Log4j scare when the third-party scanner failed and we spent 2 weekends patching blind. The one nobody but me knew existed. I went straight to the 2FA register and revoked my mobile authenticator. No alert was triggered, because I built it that way. I coded the offboarding pathway to respect admin tokens as gospel. If a key holder revoked their own credentials, it wasn't suspicious. It was assumed to be protocol. Because why would anyone revoke themselves if they weren't transitioning the role? Exactly. I checked the system health dashboards. Everything's still green. Uptime steady. No red flags, no blips. Just calm, efficient silence. Trevor would walk in Monday morning none the wiser. He'd assumed the rotation worked. That the junior team had seamlessly inherited everything, that the scripts ran as intended, and for a few hours they might, until the first patch fails to deploy, until a DNS sync hangs, until the CI pipeline quietly refuses to commit, because the system can't validate the source signature anymore, because that signature was mine. and it no longer existed. I closed my laptop, locked the drawer one final time, walked out without looking back. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I thought, you never notice the foundation until it's gone. At exactly 10:05 a.m., I walked past the row of open concept desks, past the makeshift kombucha station nobody touched, and into Trevor's corner office like I owned the floor. Because for 15 years, I kind of did. He didn't even look up at first, just waved a hand like I was there to deliver someone else's coffee. "Give me a sec," he muttered, eyes locked on his phone, thumbs tapping out what I'm sure was something critical like a tweet about engineering culture. I placed the envelope on his desk. Crisp, centered, labeled only Clause 12B. He glanced at it, still smirking. "Sounds like one of those HR codes for early retirement," he said. "You put in your 2 weeks, Grandma?" I didn't respond, just stood there, box in hand. Finally, he looked up, really looked. Then his eyes dropped to the box. Cardboard, unassuming, one flap slightly bent from years under my desk. Inside, my mug, my photo, the stupid little dinosaur, and one other thing. "What's in the box?" he asked, trying to sound amused, like he thought I might be bluffing. I met his eyes. "The primary access dongle for our cloud instances." Silence. He blinked, scoffed a little. "Wait, like the actual access device? The root key?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because right then, CTO David walked by. He hadn't seen me yet. He was mid-stride, coffee in hand, distracted as usual, but he caught that last word. Dongle. His head whipped around so fast it startled even Trevor. He stepped into the office like someone had just yelled, "Fire." "What did she just say?" David asked, voice suddenly low and very sober. Trevor chuckled, waving dismissively. "Relax, man, she's being dramatic. Brought in some old flash drive or whatever. Says she's quitting. Left some claws on my desk." David walked over slowly, like he was approaching a bomb. He looked down at the envelope, read the subject line, then looked up at me. I watched his face fall in stages. Recognition, realization, regret. "You kept the dongle?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Per the amendment. Clause 12B. It was never reassigned." Trevor laughed again, louder now, desperate, almost mocking. "Wait, you're serious? This is like a movie or something? What, she walks out and the systems just crash?" David didn't laugh. In fact, he looked like he might be sick. He turned to Trevor. "Tell me, please tell me, someone documented the full credential handover before you rolled out that rotation plan." Trevor blinked. "What? I mean, we updated the passwords. The kids handled the stack stuff. It's all automated now, right? The scripts." "No," David snapped. "The scripts call the automation. They don't own it." He turned back to me, voice softer now. "And the watchdog keys?" "In the dongle," I said. "Encrypted, bound to my biometrics, still active as of this morning, but not for long." David's hand dropped to his side. His coffee hit the floor. Trevor still didn't get it. "Come on, we've got backups. Fail-safes. You're not telling me we're actually dependent on a piece of hardware in a box." "Trevor," David said, each syllable sharp enough to cut steel. "That piece of hardware is the only remaining artifact binding our infrastructure's emergency recovery to a physical signature." Trevor blinked again. I watched it land. And still, he tried to bluster, puff himself up. "Okay, so fine. You've got the key. What do you want? A bigger severance? A thank you cupcake?" I didn't answer, didn't blink, just held the box a little tighter, nodded once to David, and turned to walk out. Behind me, I heard Trevor mutter something like, "Jesus, she's serious," followed by David's reply, cold and clipped. "She was always serious. You just never listened." It didn't take long. From the moment I left Trevor's office to the moment their systems began quietly unraveling, maybe 2 hours passed. That's the funny thing about infrastructure. When it fails, it doesn't do it like a Hollywood explosion. It dies slow, in pieces. First a delay, then a timeout. Then a sudden, eerie silence where there should have been logs. I was already home when it started, slippers on, tea steeping, watching the rain slice down the windows like the sky itself was scrubbing Seattle clean. My phone buzzed twice, then stayed still. I didn't check it. Didn't need to. The timing told me everything. Inside that office, panic was blooming like mold in the vents. David called IT first. Asked why the code updates hadn't gone through. Jenkins was hanging on post-commit, refusing to release to staging. They tried restarting the node, got a 403. Then they noticed the production deploys weren't triggering either. CI/CD was frozen. Their changes were queued in the pipeline with nowhere to go, like trains with no tracks. DNS lookups started timing out next. First the internal dashboards, then the analytics feed, then, sweet poetic justice, the password reset portal. IT called in a panic. One of the junior engineers tried to SSH into the production instance and was met with a message. Super user token not recognized, instance owner privileges required. Trevor, according to someone who later sent me a Slack screenshot, actually said, "Wait, what the hell is an instance owner?" David, already pale from the earlier conversation, lost it. He stormed into Trevor's office, slammed the door, and dropped the printout of Clause 12B on his desk. "You fired Root," he snapped. Trevor blinked. "She quit." "No," David said. "She resigned. Cleanly, respectfully. But you fired her in practice the moment you reassigned her stack without authorization or delegation. And now, congratulations, we can't reach a single production system without her signature." Someone from the finance team barged in minutes later. Their billing dashboard had crashed. Their Stripe webhooks were dead. They couldn't reconcile any subscriptions. One of them had been trying to update payment tiers when the pricing API stopped responding altogether. Trevor started sweating. Someone else tried to override permissions through the AWS console, only to discover the IAM tree was locked in read-only mode for every role except one, nbrooks.root.auth. And guess what? That user was no longer registered on the company's 2FA system. David put it all together faster than anyone else. That's what made him CTO in the first place. He understood architecture, knew when the beams were sagging, even if no one saw the cracks yet. He remembered the watchdog layer. He remembered the fallback vault. And he remembered that when the security contractor pitched an overhaul 3 years ago, Nina had said, "We don't need a third-party Band-Aid. We need internal trust." And then she'd quietly built the thing herself. He checked his email logs. Nothing. Checked Slack. No trace of contact. Finally, he opened Outlook and started typing. Subject line, urgent. Please. That was it. No bluff. No posturing. He knew. And me? I was sitting at my kitchen table, stirring honey into my tea, watching a hummingbird bounce against the glass like it was trying to make sense of its own reflection. I opened the email, read the subject line, smiled, closed it. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even satisfied yet. But I'll admit, there was something poetic about watching them drown in the systems I built because they never bothered to ask where the lifeboats were. And now they were calling for the one person who knew where they had been stored all along. Monday afternoon, the rain had stopped. The light outside looked like the kind you only get after something big breaks, gray but peaceful. The kind of quiet you don't trust yet. I was halfway through organizing my garage, standing ankle-deep in boxes labeled 2009 taxes and random cables that might be important someday, when my phone lit up with a call from a 200 area code. Washington, D.C. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered with a simple, "This is Nina." It was someone from a federal agency I'd worked with once during a compliance audit back in 2016. They remembered me. Apparently, they'd seen chatter about the Brooks lockout on InfoSec Twitter. "We've got a cloud migration project we'd like to discuss," the agent said. "Your name's been mentioned. A lot." I didn't say yes. Not yet. 20 minutes later, another email pinged through. Subject line, "Your reputation precedes you." This one from a cloud security firm in Austin, complete with a salary range, relocation offer, and the most polite NDA I've ever read in my life. Before I could finish reading it, another message hit my inbox. A startup I'd once consulted for, run by a scrappy ex-AWS architect who used to call me the Root Whisperer. Their message was short. "We're ready when you are. Name your price." Then came the best one. A former coworker messaged me on Signal, no words, just a screenshot from Slack, captured stealthily inside the company channel. It read, "Trevor is on leave, effective immediately." The thread below was a mix of emojis, cryptic silence, and a single comment from someone in DevOps. Guess automation couldn't save everything, huh? I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. I was already back in my chair, laptop open, reviewing system logs from the fallback monitoring service, clean as a whistle. Every system still running because I let them. Because I'd configured the final lockout with a 96-hour grace period just in case. That was running out in 12. That's when my phone rang again. David. No assistant. No buffer. Just him. He didn't waste time. Nina, he said, voice strained. I want to be honest. We screwed up. I screwed up. And I'm hoping, really hoping, you'll consider helping us transition cleanly. I paused, stirred my tea, let him wait. Then I said, happy to consult. He exhaled like he'd just dropped a live grenade. I waited one more beat, then added, at my new rate. Silence. Then, understood. We settled on a 2-week engagement, triple my old pay, independent contractor terms, no internal meetings unless requested. I would not be reporting to Trevor's replacement. I would not be reclassified. I would not be attending any retrospectives. I was simply there to unlock the world they'd forgotten how to enter. And when I sent over my engagement agreement, I made sure to add one small clause at the bottom. Consultant retains right to refuse any future extension beyond agreed term. All system documentation delivered will be final and complete as of date of final invoice. Translation: no do-overs, no lifelines, you get me once, and only once. That night, I slept better than I had in months, not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped fixing things for the people who never bothered to ask how they worked. The next morning, I was back, but not back. I entered through the side door, guest badge clipped to my belt, escorted by a junior HR rep who couldn't meet my eyes and mumbled something about, so sorry for the mix-up. I didn't ask what she meant. I wasn't here for apologies. I was here to clean up a mess they never saw coming. David was waiting in the war room, a glass box with too many whiteboards and not enough oxygen. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, shoulders hunched, the confidence stripped down to whatever was left. When a man realizes his entire department has been held together by someone he once dismissed as set in her ways. We didn't bother with pleasantries. I slid a USB-C stick across the table, encrypted, time-stamped, password protected. Inside, full logs, access charts, token tracebacks, and a single dashboard rendered in custom Grafana colors, the same ones I'd asked for years ago and nobody bothered to approve until now. Start here, I said, pointing to a spike in system activity from 3 months back. This was the first failure that never got logged. I patched it manually. No auto-escalation. David leaned forward, scanning the screen, his brow furrowed as he realized what he was seeing. Night after night, weekend after weekend, patch jobs, silent reboots, script hotfixes, all carried out under a user signature that read nbrooks.root.auth. I watched him go pale when he hit the February cluster. These weren't flagged in incident reports. They weren't incidents, I replied. They were preventions. You don't notice the fire when someone puts it out before the alarm rings. He looked up at me. You did all this alone? No, I said. I did it quietly. He nodded slowly, like a man replaying a memory where he realizes he missed something important every single day for a year. Trevor, he muttered, like the name tasted like acid now. He told the board you'd been phased out, that you hadn't touched core systems in months. He didn't understand what he was looking at, I said. Most people don't. Automation makes ghosts of people like me. David leaned back in his chair and sighed, long and heavy. The boards called for a full audit of how we manage access roles. HR's rewriting the transition protocols from scratch. There's talk of recertifying the entire engineering department. I didn't say anything. I just handed him a printout of my final invoice. He flipped to the last page. There, in bold at the bottom, were the only words I wanted him to remember. Root released. All keys logged. Good luck. He stared at it for a long time. Then, almost hesitantly, he asked, was there anything we could have done differently? That was the first real question anyone had asked me in months. I let the silence sit between us for a while. Then I said, you could have asked what I actually did here before you tried to replace it. He nodded. That was enough. We didn't shake hands. We didn't take a photo. I walked out of the war room the same way I came in, unnoticed by the 20-something engineers debating Docker versus Podman on the way to the snack wall. But as I passed the server room, I paused. Someone had scribbled a message on the inside of the glass. "Who's watching the watcher?" I smiled. Not me, not anymore. It popped up in Slack 3 weeks after I submitted my final invoice. One of those company-wide AMA threads someone in marketing thought would boost morale after the Trevor situation, as they were calling it. Like he'd just gone missing on a hike instead of detonating the entire DevOps pipeline with his ego. The thread was full of softball questions. What's our Q3 focus? Any new snacks in the break room? Who picked the new logo colors? And then, buried in the middle like a pebble in a shoe. So, what was in the box? A mel.dev followed by the crying laugh emoji, because of course, it was meant as a joke. Just another wink at the chaos, a meme in the making. A few replies trickled in. Some gifs. Someone posted a photo of a cat in a shoebox. Harmless stuff. Then, unexpectedly, David replied, just one sentence. She held the keys. We held the door open. And that was it. No follow-up, no elaboration. The thread went quiet. Not out of fear, but reverence. Because everyone knew what it meant now. Every junior dev who'd heard whispers. Every product manager who wondered why deploys felt smoother these days. Every intern who learned about Clause 12b in a policy revision meeting and suddenly realized the quiet lady with the dinosaur mug wasn't just old Nina. I never went back. Not even to return the badge. I mailed it in with a sticky note that said simply, "Thanks for the memories. Good luck with the logs." 3 months later, I was out of tech, at least the kind that required a key card and tolerated open office plans designed by people who thought collaboration meant chaos. I started a consulting firm, small, remote, quiet, no frills, just one mission, training women over 40 in cloud security leadership, not help desks, not support roles. Real authority, architecture, policy, keys. Because if they weren't going to hand us the torch, we'd build our own fire. I don't do interviews, I don't brag, and I don't chase headlines. But every now and then, I get a LinkedIn message from someone I used to work with. Most just say one thing. I didn't get it back then. I do now. And I never reply. I don't have to. They assumed I was a relic. I was the firewall.